Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. I think the preliminaries have already been carried out, and there is no formality left at all, right? Recitation has been done? Okay. So I am at your disposal now. If any one of the guests would like to ask a question or two, she is most welcome, please. You already got the names?
They're sitting on the left side.
Right, over there. So please, let's start straight away. Somebody should invite, like in Ansarullah, there was one moderator who invited them one after the other because had got the list of those who had decided to ask questions. So it was a very orderly performance. So you can go to the microphone and invite the guests one after the other, please.
She's the first one. She just gone out.
Acha, right. Come to yes.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I just went outside to see where is my daughter.
It's all right, yes. I just met her there.
Yeah, you know her.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. You
A
have
small, very cute child, isn't she?
That's right.
That's right, yes.
Thank you. I'm Adila Ahmed from Luton, and I'm Bosnian refugees. I'm here.
You're the one
in
whom I
England.
misunderstood for somebody else last time.
Yes,
That's
it was
right.
Merima.
It's set over there.
That's
Yes.
right.
That's right.
She was translator for a long time.
Quite.
And you asked for her father. I have information her father feel very well now.
I see.
I saw him recently.
I'm so happy.
Yeah. I'm living here for 3 years. I read a book about True of Ahmadiyyan, and my knowledge about Ahmadiyyan are a little higher than, of course, before. I found so many interesting things in this book and make me thinking about lots of questions. But one I found it very interesting. It's one time Hazrat Ghulam Ahmad, peace be on him, offer 10,000 rupees for everyone from another religions, from Catholic or
Anyone.
Arya, Brahma, doesn't matter who, to just explain 1/5 of them religion, as much as he can explain Islam in his book Barahin, Ahmadiyya. I'm interesting, does anyone until his life took his offer and just tried to explain 1/5 of religion? What's not so much, isn't it?
None, to my knowledge, has taken up that challenge so far.
During his life,
Even after that.
even not today.
Yes. Because this Barahin Ahmadiyya is a very, very difficult book, even for a learned leader to understand easily. It is so full of possible arguments in favor of Islam and critical of others who have been attacking Islam from different angles, that Chaudhry Zafrullah Khan Sahib, late Sir Muhammad Zafrullah Khan Sahib, who had a very good command over English, worldwide known. He was also one time the chairman of the United Nations. He told me that of all the works of translations he had undertaken, this is the most difficult. It is so concentrated in knowledge and wisdom and arguments based on the Quran, on common understanding, etc., that even my father, who was an extremely wise and intelligent person, he said, it is difficult for me to read this book continuously for more than a few pages. Why? Because at every turn of the sentence, my mind is taken to my mind takes flight into some direction. It was not because he couldn't understand it. It was because so much was said in this that at one point his mind would take flight into one area of thinking and philosophical contemplations and so on, and then he would return, then he would start the next sentence and another take-off point. So that is why this book has never been answered so far by anyone, and never even been attempted to be answered. So the 10,000 rupees still lie in wait for them. Right.
Sister Kathy Hamilton.
That's right.
Assalamu alaikum, Mirza. I'm really glad to be here today.
Could you kindly come closer to the microphone, please?
sorry.
Yes, better.
Assalamu
Wa
alaikum,
alaikum
Mirza.
salam.
How do you feel that Muslim women can adhere to the teachings in the Holy Quran, especially in a Western society where morals are very different in regards to violence, sex, alcoholism, and things like that?
Right. You see, I'm just coming from a question and answer session with some English friends in the studios upstairs,
Yes.
where this was one of the most important questions they asked, and I've already answered this. But I'll try not to repeat what I said there, because both these programs will be displaced today.
Right.
That is my problem. So the question regarding the Muslim ladies confronting challenges from a promiscuous Western society. This is the nutshell of your question. First of all, it should be fully understood that it is not a Christian society which poses any challenges in that area, because no such society exists anywhere in the world today. Christianity has given in to immorality, finally at a level of the church leadership. You see things today which were not unthinkable, no one could dream of such a thing, that the leadership of Catholic or other churches should debate the issue of whether homosexuals should be given ministerial offices in the church or not, while they read in the Bible what happened to the people of the Lot, the people of Lot. And now you see occasionally a bishop appearing on television saying that fornication is, after all, not that bad and difficult to meet the challenges, you know. So all this is happening to Christianity. And the challenge is both to Islam and Christianity together, alike. My response would be that religious forces who are genuine and honest and dedicated to the cause of goodness should join hands in this. It should not be an issue where Muslims are left with alone by themselves to tackle this. Because if they do it, they cannot succeed. It will be very difficult for the Muslims in general to succeed. Because what happens here is a very complicated affair. When the Muslims take up these values, which are protective of chastity, then they are looked down upon as bringing in their foreign culture and obstructing the passage of civilization in our countries. Well, this is absolutely wrong. The fact is that these challenges are as much destructive to Christianity as to Islam. And both should join forces. Otherwise, Islam would be tackled on a different angle, from which would ultimately tend the society to become more racist, while the issue is much deeper than that. In fact, when these things happen in the society freely, then the crime is automatically promoted. All sorts of crime. And that crime which is promoted by certain attitudes of the society as such cannot be tackled properly at the police level. It results into some other more complicated problems. You see, the drugs, alcoholism, and this free mixing and things, permissiveness we may call it, are all part of the same game. They don't stand separately to each other, they are interrelated things. And this society as a whole gives birth to irresponsibility and crime, criminal attitudes, particularly among the youth. The poorer they are, more difficult it is for them to have access to the luxury which is being displayed on television with reference to American, film industry and things. They are, in fact, they are not even true picture of America. They're just ethereal views of something, a luxury, which creates excitement and works sentiments, while does not increase your access to those luxuries at all. The result is that most of the poor people in the society, they are left in a state of excitement which they cannot fulfill. So it reflects on their views, attitudes, discipline, responsibilities, and then they say, all right, what may happen, we must have something of this pleasure. If not these higher level pleasures of luxury, at least we should be permitted to escape from consciousness. That is alcoholism, drug addiction, and so on. And even the poor things do not have enough money for that either. So they have to they have to break into the other people's houses, because driven by the urge of getting drug when you are addicted, once someone is addicted, is a very powerful force within you, from within man, which is very difficult to suppress. So a society which has already become less religious, which is not answerable to God anymore, why should it be answerable to man-made laws and man-made agencies? So these things promote each other, this complex irresponsibility grows and multiplies. The role of police, the more these things happen, the less effective the police becomes, because the problems are too big for the police to tackle. After a while, a stage arrives where the government exchequer holds its money from being channeled into the police. They say, no more. And what can we do then? How can we meet the crime?
That's true.
You have imposed restrictions on our interference with civil liberties. So all right, show some relaxation on these. Give police more power. And the result is devastating. Your country is now following the footsteps of those third world countries where police is the biggest challenge to peace and security. Police itself is. You have not drawn your lesson from what happened in France vis-a-vis Algerians in their country and the free powers given to the police of France as compared to that of England. So I remember the time when I was here as a student, I never read a single complaint against police in those days in any newspaper. Only a word of praise. When you wanted police, it would appear from nowhere. Somehow, it would precipitate from thin air for your service. But here, when you don't want them, they precipitate, They appear suddenly and they play havoc with your peace. Sometimes they break into your houses, even within the short, our smaller denomination of Ahmadiyya experience. I know cases of absolutely innocent Ahmadis whose houses were broken into and doors were smashed suddenly in the middle of the night by police. And they decamped with everything they could lay their hands to. They said, we have been given authority. You can't do anything about it. And every time after 2 months suffering and misery, things were returned and the police had to admit there was no case. But nothing could be done against the police in that because the police has been now given authorities to do that. So the more authorities you give, the more abusive the police itself becomes. This is the dilemma we are facing. So what my answer again is that we, as Muslims, we should join hands with genuine Christians who are loyal to Christian values, not the church, which only cares for its leadership. But from the people, you know, the genuine Christians who are benign, who are genuine, who are philanthropists, we should tell them, come on, let's join forces and make societies which rise above racist deviance. Right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Shukran.
Thank you. Jazakallah.
Amina Yusuf, please.
Amina? What you said next?
Yusuf.
Amina Yusuf. You're from?
Ghana.
From Ghana, right?
They are
Kumasi or Accra or War or where?
Praise Kumasi.
From Kumasi, right.
Praise Huzu. According to history, Adam has two children, Cain and Abel. After Abel was killed by his brother Cain, Cain ran away to another land and got married. This is my question. Please, if Adam was the first creation, how did Cain get women to marry? Because
Right.
after the death of Abel, before Adam got another child called Seth, according to Bible Genesis 4, chapter 4, verse 25.
You see, first of all, the real answer is that it is absolutely false to believe that Adam was the first man on earth. The best you can say is that he was the first man in that period of time in the human history who was considered fit enough for God, by God, to carry his messenger with full trust. And so he is the first human being who rose to the status of prophethood. Now, I believe that even then Adam was not just unique and alone in that respect, because there may be many other Adams of that sort appearing in different countries of the world at different times. And they also gave birth to a sort of religion suitable for that period, which began to evolve after them. We read from the history of Aborigines in Australia that their religion began around 40,000 years ago. As far as the existence of human beings is concerned, no knowledgeable person can deny this fact that men or human beings were found in almost all parts of the known world today for around, say, 40, 50,000 years before the Adam and Eve tale you read about. And as far as the beginning of Homo sapiens or humans is concerned, sometimes some scientists believe that the human race began 115,000 years before, or some take the record even back. They're Neanderthal man whose remains have been discovered, and it is supposed to belong to, say, 300,000 years ago or that about. I'm not very sure of this, but I know the figure is around the same area of a few 100,000 years. So discoveries are made in Australia, in Africa, in some other parts of the world, where such remains are discovered of human beings whose scientific study reveals that they had reached the stage of human capabilities. The examination of the skull, the size, the brain, all these things indicate. But the problem is only this, that these early human forms are divided into two categories. One is called Homo erectus and the other is called Homo sapien. The humans as we are Homo sapiens. The Homo erectus is the first form of human life on earth which could stand and walk straight on earth. Erectus, that sort of thing. Instead of walking on the four limbs, first humanoid type of things which appeared on earth are called Homo erectus. They are it is whose remains are found to have been found, whose remains are found buried in some areas of the earth, which can be calculated to belong to an age of 300, 400,000 years before. But as far as the Homo sapiens are concerned, their history seems to be shorter. That is around 100,000 plus. And Adam's history is so short that it's hardly 6,000 years since Adam is known to have been born. And I have seen trees older than Adam today, living trees in America, which are older by a few hundred years or 1,000 years than the age of the whole humanity if it began from Adam. When Adam was born, there was one tree in America in redwood forest which saw the birth of Adam, and it had already grown to adulthood by living for 1,000 years or so on earth. See? So it's all absurd. It's just a simplistic and wrong understanding of divine statements. One should read meanings into those things, and one would find a different message. Adam and Eve were not the very first. So the remaining questions are automatically, disposed of. Right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Again, from the other point of view, your objections seem to be against Adam's sons marrying their sisters. If there is no other human being. Is that what you had in mind? So if Adam could marry his own daughter born out of his own rib, what objection there should have been against their children marrying each other? The objection should begin from the beginning. According to these stories, Eve was born or carved out of Adam's rib. So it's a father-daughter relationship. And yet he married her and gave birth to many children. So this is not the fault of the Bible, but the fault either of the scribes who missed some important things or added from themselves certain things to the story, or the fault of the present-day scholars, instead of finding other evidence from the Bible which would have led them on to certain truth, the certain truth that Adam and Eve were not the very first. With relation to that story of Abel and Cain, when God punished the murderer brother, it is written in the Bible that he was excommunicated and he was turned out of the country. He was expatriate. No, how do you call it in English? To be thrown out of your country, And there he married among outsiders, people who didn't belong to the nation where Adam was born. So the Bible says it in so many words. So it is the fault of the interpreters not to take the biblical story as a whole and draw rightful conclusions from that. Instead, they concentrate only on the story of Eve being carved out of the rib of Adam and forget the rest of the Bible around it. Right?
Thank you.
Dr. Vidya Rao of Birmingham, please.
Chanda.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Dr. Vidya Rao.
That's right.
From India?
Yes, I'm from India originally. I've been in Birmingham for over 10 years.
Right. Which part of India, by the way?
Hyderabad.
Delhi, at Hyderabad, Deccan.
That's right, yes.
MashaAllah.
So I'm not unfamiliar with
Right,
Muslims,
right,
and,
right.
but it's different working in Britain.
Yes.
So I have some questions here. I'm a school doctor, I'm a pediatrician in Nottingham.
Could you please
and
come
sometimes-
closer to the microphone?
Sometimes we...
Yes.
Is that all right? Yeah.
Right, right.
We have this immunization program for school children in summer months. I understand that Ramadan goes back by 10 days every year, is that right?
Right.
But sometimes it falls in, so maybe in a few years' time it will be again in summer months. And we have a lot of problems, especially it costs quite a lot and the days are fixed about 6 or 10 months beforehand. And the injections are drawn up and the drops are all made. And then we find very few children turning up to take the medicines because obviously it's not allowed.
Take the medicine in, within 24 hours, any time?
Those are drops actually given at school.
You
and an
see,
injection.
you are talking of perhaps the winter period more than the summer period. Which period do you have in mind?
Unfortunately, it's in summer.
In the summer, okay.
Yes.
In the summer, you have to immunize mothers or children.
The children at school.
The children don't have to fast. No problem.
I'm very glad to hear that.
The children who have not come of age, they are not expected to fast.
They are between 11 years and 16 years.
They are not expected to fast. They are not
Right.
bound to fast. Occasionally, by way of practice or out of curiosity, many children opt for that.
I'm very glad to hear this
Yes, that's
because
right.
the parents say that we don't mind the children taking these injections, but our own religious leaders, they sort of...
You see, you're talking of a misunderstood Islam.
I'm sure that's the
But
case.
I'm not representing them. I'm representing Islam as we understand in Ahmadiyya community, which we find an extremely enlightened and enlightening religion. And there is never a clash between the genuine needs of man and the religious dictates of Islam.
So will it be all right for us to go ahead and give the medicines if the children are...
You see, it's not all right for you to go ahead and do anything to anybody's children, anywhere in the world. Because the right belongs to the parents and the children themselves. Unless some social requirement is so urgent that a law is passed whereby every citizen is bound to be forced to cooperate with certain measures. That is a different situation. But in principle, this is accepted that the children must be treated with the permission of their parents. And as such, many times I receive letters from schools here that this is our problem, we want to inoculate or do this and that to children, and the children don't like it, or parents have objection, what should we do? I tell them they should be persuaded. They should be told that it's in their own interest that you're doing it. But you can't force anybody to do that. Moreover, it is wrong to believe that inoculation or other such measures are number one, always necessary, number one, always useful, and they do not have any other attendant dangers. I have seen immunization attempts in various diseases producing exactly the diseases against which they were considered to be prophylactic and preventive. Sometimes some vaccine is not properly prepared. A slight imbalance in the virility of the virus or the virus product would create either the danger of that disease showing its symptoms in the body or being ineffective, it is too low. So many times such vaccines have been withdrawn by even in advanced countries, because when they heard reports that they are not always good or they have created some side effects not acceptable according to health standards, they are withdrawn. So that's what I mean to say. We cannot overmuch trust these things. And being a homeopath, I know that many situations of vaccination and inoculation can be absolutely avoided because homeopathic offers a better way of preventive measure against diseases for a longer period than these vaccinations offer. And for example, in my family, I have always been giving my children, my wife, etc., these homeopathic medicines as preventives, and we never suffered from typhoid, from other similar diseases which spread all around us, as a proof that they were working, they were effective. Only we had to have these injections when we had to travel to some countries where it was essential, legal requirement. For instance, when we went to Africa or some Australia, etc., they needed it as a legal requirement that we must be inoculated, and then we did. We did get inoculated. This is in general the whole picture. But you find nothing of the genuine requirement of man counter to the teachings of Islam. Right?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Diane Clark, please.
From
She hasn't mentioned. Where are you from?
Sierra Leone?
I'm from Birmingham.
Pardon?
From Birmingham.
Right, please.
I'd like to know if there's a God Allah, why does he let such suffering and murder and different things that are so wrong in the world continue if there's a God?
Would you kindly repeat this question, please?
She says if there is a merciful,
Closer.
if there is a God who is merciful, why has he allowed all the suffering in the world?
That's right. You see, this is a question which I have dealt with in some depth and at length in a book which is about to be published. And its title is, let me see, just the first word, yes, rationality, revelation. In relation to rationality and relation and revelation in relation to knowledge and truth. This is a complex title, but this is the shortest I could make out of it, because this is a large area of discussion on these matters in which the book deals. And there I have taken up this issue. You understand? So instead of going through all the detailed answers, which requires quite some treatment, it would take me about half an hour or more, perhaps, to fully satisfy you on this issue, because it's a very delicate question and cannot be understood in a short answer. But if you go through that chapter, then those who have already gone through those chapters outside Ahmadiyya, outside Islam, they were genuinely convinced, yes, we have found an answer to that. So wait for the publication and have your address registered, and we'll send you the book. Right? Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. आप नोट कर लें इनका एड्रेस प्लीज. Next please.
Tina Coombs. Please.
ठंडा होता है हमेशा. Walaikum Assalam. Please.
My name is Tina Coombs. I'm Austrian originally, but I live here for quite a number of years with my British husband. We have a family of 3 girls,
Yes.
another one coming. And I agree very much what you said to the lady, Kathy, I think was her name, that the Christian and Muslim good people should join forces.
That's right,
because there are so many challenges and pressures on the family today, and everybody, if we are in a Christian or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist society,
Yes, they are all concerned.
everybody is concerned. Right. And myself here, I work with the Federation for World Peace. Maybe you have heard about it.
That's right.
And I was wondering if, what would you suggest? as a practical means that really Muslim and Christian and that we could join forces as a practical
Yes, that's
project. What do you
In fact, this has been my mission, which I have been trying to perform or do my responsibility to this mission, serve my cause as best as possibly I can. Whenever I visit different countries and meet their intelligentsia, their leadership, political and otherwise, this has always been the message which I keep on the top of the agenda of my discussion. You have pointed out very rightly that this is the most important issue which should be settled not singly by religions,
No, that's right.
it cannot be, but jointly.
Exactly.
And not singly by nations, but jointly by nations.
That's right.
The most difficult problem in the way of settling this issue rightfully is that the United Nations itself is incapable of dealing with this issue because it is the most disunited nation in the world. This is a hard fact. Only nations united in name, while it is the supremacy of America which is being expressed through United Nations, or attempted to be expressed through United Nations, and there is nothing of unity in that body of the World Forum. Now, religious problem is that the religious leaders themselves do not want to cooperate with others on these things, because then there is a very likelihood of their losing their own ground to some other religions.
That's right.
So they want to create distances between Christianity and Islam, between Hinduism and Islam, and so on and so forth. So that is why it is the religious leadership which is responsible for all such explosions which put Muslims and Christians apart once again, and they begin to distance themselves after having come closer. I gave the example of Salman Rushdie and his work. It can be proved beyond a shadow of doubt that he had a full blessing of Christian church and also of Judaism. It was the Penguin, the complex of publishers, which advanced him $1 million for that book, for that filth, I should say. Now, why should Christians and Jews join hands in creating an explosion which would set apart the Muslim and Christian nations of the world?
Yes.
The obvious benefit would be most likely drawn by the Jews themselves, because if they remain bracketed with the Western world under the racist heading of being whites, it suits them. And if the Muslims come closer to the West through Christian Islam alliance, that would go against the interest of the world Jewry. That is what I feel. I'm not sure, but this is my reading of what may have happened. And I know that Salman Rushdie, as far as religion is concerned, is an unlettered man. He is not the type of person who would waste his time in study of religion. Right from the beginning, he was brought up in such Christian schools in India as would, diminish his interest in Islam and things, and would try to develop him as a sort of westernized Indian. And this is his background. He has been promiscuous in his ways of life. He's been all sort of things except a white man. That he couldn't be. But to adopt the follies of the Western culture seems to be an advantage to a person of the third world, because then he has that simple complex in him that now I'm like them. to act freely, to have no regard to Islamic injunctions and Islamic teachings of abstaining from wine, alcohol, other things, etc. If you live a free life, the study of religion becomes the most boring thing for you.
Yes, that's right.
I'm talking of that psychological setup. How on earth could Salman Rushdie be led to that study of Islam which led him to all those areas of criticism where many hundred years of Christian investigation had led the Western world to? How, in a nutshell, he suddenly came to learn of the 300 years of hostility on the part of Christian fathers and their literature against Islam. And wherever they were assisted by some stupid Muslim scholars in finding room for censure, they picked those points, and that was all their Islamic study was. Now Salman Rushdie, if you read him, it's difficult I know, but if you read him, then you will see him, you can trace him all along back to the same path. He has no personal study of Islam whatsoever, because he doesn't seem to have seen the other side of the picture at all. A genuine investigator, even if, and particularly when he is born to a Muslim parents, would not be inimical. At least if he is not sympathetic, he would be neutral. But he is trained as a man not only hostile, but absolutely abusive of the most noble traditions of Islam, the most noble personages of Islam. I can trace him back to certain books which were published only within the last 50 years by some Christian scholars, and the titles which were given to their chapters were exactly repeated by Salman Rushdie. So it was a conspiracy. It didn't happen by chance. He had written some other filthy literature and nobody knew him. He didn't belong to that class of artists or the writers who would immediately become popular because of their very special stance and style and understanding of life. He was completely ignored as a small man. But when he unleashed his attack against Islam, suddenly he became the most popular man in the world. Of all those who censured Islam, he stood out. Presidents met him, United States President, Canadian. What was happening? That is the danger to which I am trying to point out, that there is continuously an underlying current of hatred of Islam and fear of Islam, which is expressed in these attempts and which stand in the way of bringing the Muslim world community with the Christian world community together. And in this, unfortunately, the unseen hand of crime is very powerful. It works and nobody can stop it.
Well, but there must be a way to...
Pardon?
There must be a way so that...
The simple way is, like one I adopted, but I miserably failed in creating any impression on the world. You know why? I held, for instance, a press conference on the issue of reaction on the issue of Iranian reaction to Salman Rushdie and all the debate it generated. And it was a very well attended press conference where all the national press was represented and the smaller press from different countryside were also represented. And I was received with great courtesy and nodding of the heads in my favor when I answered these questions from Islamic point of view. But do you know what, in the end, what I said? I told them, thank you very much for all this courtesy and agreement on many areas of so far erstwhile differences. But I tell you, nothing will be published tomorrow in the press. And some, of course, understood. But some naively asked this question, why do you say that? Why shouldn't it be published? I said, because if I had said a single sentence supporting the attitude of Khomeini, then you could have splashed the headlines in the papers. But because I'm defending Islam so reasonably, so convincingly, that the very purpose of the publishing of this book would be lost if you issue my statements. So next day, I think only we found in one small paper, in one corner, in small print, the news that I had addressed a press conference, and that was that. Even those who were genuinely interested in publishing, some of them were contacted by us. They said, we wrote an excellent article about it, but it was rejected by the authorities of the, who control. It's not the right of every correspondent to write whatever he likes. It's not always published. To find place in the article, in the paper, requires a a higher level decision. So in this case, every time the decision was against the publication of this. I've traveled Europe, I went to America, I went to Canada. Everywhere I held press conferences to remove misunderstandings of the Christian world regarding the Islamic reaction, and never in any country was my interview published. While on other issues, they published my statements. It's not that they belittled me. It is because they did not want these statements to be highlighted because they favored Islam. Right?
On behalf of the Federation for World Peace, can I invite you for an interview, maybe sometime when you have time next week?
Yes.
Would that be possible?
If you mean you could come here and interview me anytime you feel like, if I have time, of course, but I'll find time for you.
That would be wonderful.
Most certainly.
Are you available?
You can come and your interview could be televised to the whole world, if you so like.
Well,
And if you
I don't
want
have
it
a
to be
television
published,
company, but
if you want to be published alone, just published, then it's your choice.
yes.
I'll be ready.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't have a television, but
Okay.
we would be happy to meet you if you have time.
Do please.
Okay. Thank
After my return from the continent, I'm visiting the continent, Germany, etc., for about 14 days.
you. Next week you will leave.
Tonight,
Today.
this afternoon, in fact.
Okay.
So after I have returned, you can reach us through the contact or directly. You can write to me,
Okay.
and inshallah we'll arrange some interview. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Not at all. Thank you.
And have a safe journey to Europe.
Thank you.
Miss Rahmatullah, please.
Miss Rahmatullah. It's a name which you generally do not find in Africa.
Yes.
Rahmatullah.
Yes.
It's a unique thing to hear of somebody called Miss Rahmatullah.
Miss Rahmatullah.
You're from the Gambia?
No, Senegal.
Senegal, yes. The figures of the Gambians and Senegalians are very similar. You know, the Gambia is surrounded by Senegal.
Yes.
So the style of people, their features, their statures are very similar, aren't they? Yes. Please.
Assalamu
You speak French?
Yes, I speak
Right.
French.
Parlez-vous français? Seulement français?
Je parle français
Oh,
un peu
aussi English?
oui, et
Okay.
un peu africain.
Speak in English then, please. Huh?
Assalamu alaikum, Hazrat.
Microphone adjust कर देना आवाज़ ठीक है.
As I know, Muslim and Christian are different religions, and most of the time people said it is two ways. Muslims believe in God and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Christians believe in Jesus. And it is two ways, but we are all going in the same God. But I don't know from that which religions are true. If we are all going in the same God, why aren't we the same?
But you know that, don't you? You already know it. It's a very simple, universal formula to be applied. You know, those periods of history when Jesus was not yet born were treated by God differently from the time when Jesus was born, or exactly alike? Is there any visible difference of treatment of God of His creatures after the birth of Jesus Christ? And also, was it different treatment by God in relation to other regions of the world where Christianity had not reached, the message of Christianity had not reached? Do you find the different treatments of the Creator divided in time or in space? None whatsoever. Is the same one God who manifests Himself to all the countries of the world alike and all the people of the world alike, and has been doing it in all the ages exactly the same way. So there is no duality in God. So there is no need for knowing or believing in a sort of duality which does not relate to us anyway. You understand? Now this is my attitude as a human being. I am not quoting the Quran or quoting the Bible either. So I'm not taking up a debate based on scriptures. I'm just speaking as a human being, as a universal image, a representative of man. I personally can't believe in anything which presents God against His image, reflected in nature and in the creation of man and in the history of man. Right? As far as the concept of sin being born out of the first sin of Adam and Eve, this is also completely rejectable, because Adam and Eve were not the first people. And they were not the forefathers of all the human beings we find on earth. Because as all the Christian scientists have established and sociologists have established, at least the people of Australia anteceded the birth of Adam by some 34,000 years. This is their known history. So where did they get their propensity to commit crime or sin from? From where? They were not descendants of Adam and Eve. Chinese may not have descended from Adam and Eve, but some other Adam, because their history also goes back to far more than 40,000 years. You may call it legend or myth, whatever you may call it, but as far as the history goes, the Chinese history, it puts the date of their beginning back to some hundreds of thousands of years. You know, the first known heroes who appeared in China, whose names are mentioned in their history, belong to an age, 100,000 years or so. So that is why I say there is no problem whatsoever. The fact is that we must find areas of unity in religions, in Christianity, in Hinduism, in Islam, in Judaism, and that is the wisest policy we should pursue. Instead of wasting our time on differences, we must concentrate on points of commonality, and thereby we can build an equation which will be useful for the mankind as such. So I would like you to concentrate on that point. When you study the morality of Christianity, fundamentally it is the same as the morality in every other religion. So what is common, why shouldn't we concentrate on that and join forces to achieve that. What we lack here on earth is the moral teaching of religions. It is only the moral teachings of religions which can bring man together and unite it. As far as the doctrinal teaching is concerned, it has always been responsible for factionalism, for deviance, for disruptions, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, still religious leadership emphasizes doctrinal differences, while they should highlight the points of commonality as far as the teaching between man and man is concerned, the conduct of man towards his brother or sister is concerned. There they will find almost all religions in agreement, because they speak the language of conscience, the universal human language. You understand? Yes, please. Next.
Huzur, about 5 questions have been submitted by some ladies who do not wish to appear on the microphone.
Yes.
The first question amongst them is, there are many Pakistani Muslims who believe that it is wrong to call any Muslim as a non-Muslim. But what can they do in the present situation of Pakistan to establish peace in the country? This is from Munira Khalil of Birmingham.
You see, first of all, let me clarify that I have no objection against anybody calling anybody non-Muslim, considering him to be non-Muslim. Because if I take that right from him or her, it would be interfering with his fundamental human right. If somebody is brought up in a manner of religious training where he thinks that there are certain fundamentals to that religion, which if missing in another person, a follower of another sect, would give him the message that because that fundamental is not present in his concept of Allah and Rasul, so he cannot be genuinely defined as Muslim. Can it happen or not? It can happen genuinely. So how can one take the right away from everybody, that even if he considers somebody to be not genuine Muslim, he should, for the sake of unity, go on calling him a genuine Muslim? It's not right. The objectionable point is a completely different thing from this. If you consider somebody to be a Muslim, you have a right to consider him as non-Muslim, but you have no right to force him to call himself a non-Muslim, because the same principle of fundamental human right will be violated then. Christians have been calling others as non-Christians, but they have never in history snatched the right from each other to still continue to call themselves Christians. What is happening in Pakistan is the most distorted thing in religious history. They consider us to be non-Muslims, Ahmadis, while they have been considering each other non-Muslims for last 1300 years, at least 100 years after, even before Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, closer to him than 1300 years. There are sects in Islam who have been considering others as not Muslims. But as such, they continue to disagree with each other. Never they imposed this compulsion on any sect they considered non-Muslim as not to behave like a Muslim, not to act as a Muslim, not to call themselves as Muslims, and not to do anything by way of Muslim worship which would make them appear like Muslims. This never happened in any religion in the world before, and even in Islam before the time of these recent decisions of government of Pakistan vis-a-vis Ahmadiyya. No, what they are doing is this: we are a majority, a political majority, and democratically we have a right to vote you down, to consider you anything, and this is a democratic right of the people. So it's not a question of interference in religion. This is a question only an exercise of a democratic right. This is what the ambassador of Pakistan here wrote in answer to a letter of protest by a British MP as to why these things are happening to Ahmadiyyat, and the same answer was given in Canada and in other places of the world. So it was a well, tailored answer supplied to all the ambassadors. But if you study it further, there is no, iota of wisdom in that answer. The fact is that, first of all, democracy is democracy and religion is religion, and never the twain shall meet. And when they do, they create disorder. This is supported by the world history. As long as they remain separate, there is peace. When religion and democracy or politics join hands, they create havoc for the peace of mankind. Because the politician can, of course, be cruel to their own people, but in their own name. But when cruelties are perpetrated against others in the name of God, then human beings begin to play God, and they have the support of a political system behind them. Then what happens? A Khomeini is born, a Zia is born, and Inquisition begins to take root in Spain, and so on and so forth. This is a murderous mistake. And in this respect, politics must be kept aloof and separate from religious domain, and they should not interfere with each other. Secondly, you see anybody to be something. For instance, they have declared us to be non-Muslims. Okay. Can a democracy declare somebody to be a dog? A human being to be a dog? They say, yes, why not? We have a right, we have a majority. All right, you declare a human being to be a dog, but can democracy force that human dog to bark? How can they teach that human being to act like a dog and behave like a dog, and the moment they start, that human being behaves like a human being, he's penalized, he's punished, because he has broken the law, democratic law. Is there any wisdom in that? This is exactly what is taking place against Ahmadiyya. They say we have a human right, a democratic right, to consider yourself to be outside the pale of Islam. We say, yet we have that same democratic right to consider ourselves to be within the pale of Islam. So that is the stalemate. No more. You call us non-Muslims, we call ourselves Muslims, that's all. When you declare something against a minority political party, you cannot force that political party to agree with you and start acting like you believe they are. Only the democratic majority has a right to legislate as they please, but they cannot change the nature of the political parties who are in opposition. For instance, if there is, consider a Labour Party for instance, and there is a majority government of Conservatives. If they declare that we democratically think that you are not Labour, you are a communist party, what can that poor minority do in a democratic state? They say, all right, do whatever you please, but this is nonsense. They say, no, it's not just nonsense. We are going to legislate now that if any member of Labour Party acts like a member of Labour Party from now on, he will be punishable to 3 years rigorous imprisonment. From now on, because we consider him to be a member of Communist Party, every member of the Labour Party must start acting as a communist. Can this happen in democracy? This is what is happening in the so-called Pakistani democracy. They declare Ahmadis to be non-Muslims and they want us to act as non-Muslims. We say that will not happen. Do whatever you may. You can call us dogs, whatever name you give us. All right, we'll tolerate that. But if you expect us to behave like you think we are, that's not going to happen. This is the problem which is now being dealt forcibly by the enforcement of laws and penal codes, etc. against Ahmadis. Thousands of Ahmadis are facing charges which may lead to their imprisonment to 3 years, rigorous imprisonment or more, or may lead to their condemnation to death. Because the law now interprets the legislation against Ahmadis in the sense that if an Ahmadi declares La ilaha illallahu Muhammadur Rasulullah, which means there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet, according to the the Chief Justice of High Court of Pakistan, if an Ahmadi says that, it must be taken as an insult to the Holy Prophet of Islam. And as such, he must be condemned to death. These statements are published statements, they are public knowledge now. No country in the West raised their little finger against this. But when the death penalty hung over 2 Christian boys, then the entire world conscience was aroused. And right from Europe to America to Canada, the publicity was given to this, and they said, they immediately, offered them asylums, and they were removed from their country under influence, American influence, etc. And they're still at it. The 2 boys, Christian boys, against whom the same law created the threat of death, they have been noticed by the West, but Ahmadis who are treated in large numbers like this, they are completely ignored. So that is the unfortunate situation in the world. But I think I have spoken enough on this issue. Is the question answered? Or is there something left of that which I forgot?
There is one tone in the question which says that how would ordinary people who do not agree with them, how should they react in Pakistan to these laws?
Nobody can react against the law, particularly if they are living under the awe of the mullah or the fear of the mullah. Their feeling is immaterial because it is not expressed. What is expressed always, the agreement with mullah. And if particularly the politician cannot dare confront the mullah on this issue because he is afraid of losing their favor and a few votes maybe who are under the influence of the mullah as well. But the intellectuals are now rising. They are awakening to the situation and they are appearing certain articles in some magazines, some newspapers, in which some intellectuals very strongly condemn this attitude of the government and the political organizations. But they have a lonely voice, unfortunately, ineffective voice. Thank you.
The next question is that why is there so much hatred between Sikhs and Muslims when in God's eyes everybody is one? And this is from Baljit Son.
I don't agree with the question. There is no hatred among them between the Muslims and Sikhs at all. Occasionally, sometimes some people with ulterior motives stir up things only for a little while, and sometimes the misbehavior of untrained youth results in some small explosions, like it happened in Southall, was it, or somewhere else? Yes, recently, yes. No, that was the fault of those Muslim youngsters who were celebrating some day for themselves, And without any rhyme or reason, they started mocking at Sikhs and even cracking jokes against some Sikh ladies who were passers-by. That infuriated, and rightly so, the Sikh community, but their expression of their displeasure was rather, not fully recognized as genuine by the law. So some Sikhs were arrested for that. But as far as the genuine cause is concerned, I believe that there was a genuine cause for their displeasure and anger, and tempers ran really high at that time. Fortunately, it did not end up in a very serious clash. Minor injuries were suffered, of course, but we should avoid these things. Immediately, Muslim leadership should have joined heads and hands with the Sikh leadership. It should have been avoided, could be avoided in fact. There is no hatred between Muslims and Sikhs at all. Politically, in history sometimes, there was a cause of friction between the then Mughal Muslim government and the Sikhs of the Punjab. But that is a part of the history. Aurangzeb particularly, is blemished or maligned by the Sikh scholars for treating their gurus mercilessly and cruelly. But first of all, there are many exaggerations in their accounts, and some Sikh scholars themselves have written, critically of such other Sikh scholars who exaggerate the facts of cruelties of the Muslim monarchy of India against the Sikhs of the time. But there are other Sikhs who generally, from time to time want to raise up the same issue. They like stir and sort of excitement, even at the cost of peace. So recently it happened, not recently, but a few years ago it happened in Canada, where in the higher body of Sikh, I don't know what name they give it, but it was a sort of consultative body. In that consultative body, it was mentioned that, remember what this Aurangzeb did to our gurus? And it will be a shame on our part if we forget that part of history. We must bring it to light from time to time and let our new generations know where they should stand vis-a-vis their relation to Sikhism and so on. It was a very, motivated speech and stirring speech. But a Sikh wise man stood up and he completely diffused the whole issue. In fact, the tempers were suddenly transformed to a situation of laughter. He said, look here, what are you talking about? Who are you talking about? You're talking about Aurangzeb, the one who gouged the eyes of his own brother and imprisoned his own father? So if that was the emperor who did it to his own father and brother, what would you expect of him in relation to your gurus? What were they to him? Suddenly, everybody started viewing the same thing from this perspective. It was an individual person, as a king, who had his own very severe attitude to certain types of disciplines, who would not spare his own father, who would not spare his own brothers. So such a man should not be held responsible beyond his own personal domain. His religion should not be tarnished because of his act. So that wise man among the Sikhs at that time, he completely diffused the issue and everybody started laughing and the matter was over. So I tell you, genuinely the Sikhs are quite close to Muslims. During my students' days, I remember I had far more Sikh students as friends than others, because the Sikhs are a simple community, open-hearted. There are no twists in them. Only the problem is that when they are rash, they can be very rash. Once they are angry, then they know no laws to discipline them. So don't go to don't exceed that boundary of their limitations. And then you're safe. Very good friends, and lasting friends, and genuine and open people. Okay?
So the next question has been submitted by Mrs. Tharani. She says, following up on Huzur's reply to the question on morality and evils of today's society, especially gay tendencies, could he please advise, enlighten the women how to recognize the rise or advent of such tendencies in our children? Is it an environmental, medical, biological problem? How are we to solve or tackle this problem? If it is indeed a biological malfunction, what can we do to correct it? I ask this as it is often the mothers and sisters who are the closest in contact with the children and adolescents and would be the first to recognize these symptoms and hopefully also the most important ones in bringing about a change should such an unfortunate occurrence happen.
You see, my answer is a simple answer. First of all, I do not agree with the complexities of the issue as they have been presented. There are no social, biological, and other environmental or genetic involvements in the issue at all. It's a simple issue of the attitudes of a generation towards the younger generation, which they create and leave behind them. You know, there are always points where two generations meet and separate. These lines must be the focal points of our attention. If we let generation gaps to appear between one generation and the other, then we have already lost the battle of continuing or trying to continue the good traditions of the older generation into the next one. Because these gaps are never jumped. Once the gaps are created, they're created, and then your own offspring and progeny seem to drift away from you, and you have no control over that, because the rest of the society is gravitating them away from your values. So the best policy, the best advice I can render is that the parents must be mindful of the fact that they should cultivate a sort of relationship with their children whereby they find in their parents and elders the best friends they can think of. They must turn to them with full trust in all issues of decision making. They must be provided some player in the house, in the family, where they would look with hope, and they would be looking forward to returning to the peace of their homes and enjoy the closeness of the family links and pleasure and mutual trust and simple, healthy pursuits of pleasure. If this is promoted, then they will not be gravitated to the streets and to the outside home activities over which the parents can have no control. So build an inward gravitational pull whereby the home becomes the returning point of the father, of the mother, of the sisters, of the brothers, and it does not become only a resting point like a motel or a hotel. The major problem, the devastating problem of the present society is that the homes are now gradually being more and more treated as just a compulsion to return to, where you have deposited your things, you must return, you can eat quickly, easily and cheaply, and return to the points of attraction which lie outside your home activities. When this happens, then how can you have any command over your children, over your husbands either, over your wives if you're husbands? the society gets disintegrated at homes, and the society which is disintegrated at homes can never be integrated outside. It's a fool's dream, no more. So build the homes as points of attraction, a healthy point of provision of pleasure, and most of the problems of the society will melt into thin air, inshallah. Thank you.
Huzur, there are two questions on this paper and they are in Urdu.
Okay. You read the Urdu or translation as you please.
I'll read the Urdu.
Okay.
कुरान का लफ्जी मतलब क्या है? ये पहला सवाल है.
Right. Quran is a word derived from the three-lettered Arabic word qara'a. Qara'a or qira'at is the infinitive. Qira'at means to read, to recite. So qara'a can also be applied to verbal recitation, but essentially the basic root meaning is to read something like we read a paper, like this paper is before me when I read from this. That is why when the revelation began for the first time in Islam, when the angel Jibreel appeared to Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam for the first time and revealed the very first verse of the Holy Quran, it caused a little confusion in the mind of Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It said Iqra. Iqra means read, which means both reading verbally and to read from paper. And because Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallam was not, did not know how to read and write, was an unlettered person, so he said, I don't know how to read. Innocently, that was his response. Then he repeated it and said, I don't know how to read. Then he clenched him, held him tightly in his arms. It was an apparition, of course. Jibreel has no such form, human form. He appears in some different forms to different people. So that apparition of Jibreel is known to have embraced him strongly and said, read, Iqra. Then he understood what he meant and he said, Iqra, exactly as was said. The first word of revelation which he read was Iqra itself, which means read. And from then on, it all started until the end of the completion of the Quran. Quran is derived from that. The word Quran means a thing which is widely read or which is most read. Most read in the sense of all the readable material, the book which is read by most people would be called Al-Quran, or widely read also. So all the superlatives related to the reading are contained in the word Al-Quran. Right? Next, please.
This is from Talat Mazhar. Second question is in Urdu. And she says, जबकि कुरान मजीद को कुरान हकीम भी कहा है, यानी हिकमत की किताब और मुकम्मल ज़ाब्ता हयात, वाला और हदीस बुखारी शरीफ के हवाला से ये मालूम करना चाहती हूँ महदी के ज़हूर की वाज़े निशानियाँ कुरान हकीम के किन या हदीस बुखारी शरीफ में कहाँ से नज़रसानी कर सकती हूँ?
कहाँ से
नज़रसानी कर सकती हूँ?
नज़रसानी क्या मतलब?
कहाँ से पढ़ सकती हूँ?
अच्छा,
कुरान हकीम से या हदीस बुखारी शरीफ से?
But you said the question was in Urdu. This is no Urdu. कहाँ से मैं नज़रसानी कर सकती हूँ? But this is a small mistake anyway. I understand what she means. The lady means that how can I reach those verses of the Holy Quran or the traditions of the Holy Prophet? Where are they mentioned? So that I could satisfy myself as to the Quran mentioning the possibility of the appearance of Imam Mahdi and the Hadith supporting this view. Is this the question in a nutshell? Right. You see, it's a question which requires a longish answer, but I'll try to be very brief. The one place in the Holy Quran which very categorically and clearly mentions not only the possibility of a future divine representation, but a definite news that it would certainly happen, is in Surah Al-Jumu'ah. In the beginning of Surah Al-Jumu'ah, Allah tells us of the first advent of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And having spoken of that and finished the subject, suddenly it turns to the advent of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallam in another time. And the verse I have in mind, that part of the verse is وَآخَرِينَ مِنْهُمْ لَمَّا يَلْحَقُوا بِهِمْ وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَن يَشَاءُ وَاللَّهُ ذُو الْفَضْلِ الْعَظِيمِ. That Allah again is the same, who is capable, who is powerful, to raise him, Muhammad Rasulullah. Ba'asa fil ummiyina Rasulan means he raised Muhammad Rasulullah among the unlettered people of Arabia. Now this part of the verse, second verse following it is وَآخَرِينَ مِنْهُمْ. He would raise him in other people. Akhareen means who are not the same, among a different people. And وَآخَرِينَ لَمَّا يَلْحَقُوا بِهِمْ, and who have not met, they have no contact with each other. وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. And in this regard, you should remember that God is most dignified and powerful, Aziz. And Al-Hakim is also all-wise. So if he wants to do something, he does it with dignity and with power. He is capable of doing it, and also with wisdom. Then the second verse says, ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ. To appoint Muhammad Rasulullah sallam or his representative once again is a special favor of Allah, which may be bestowed on anyone. This part of the verse makes it absolutely clear that it is not the second advent of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallam himself which is being discussed. It is the advent of somebody representing him which is being discussed. Because if he were to come again, then Allah would not say, ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَن يَشَاءُ. He was known to have received this blessing of Allah, so no new person was to be bestowed with this blessing again. This verse indicates that God knows where and how to bestow his favor and on whomsoever he pleases. No man can decide this. Now this is the verse of the Quran which speaks of the advent of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah apparently at a different time, at a remote period of time from the time of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah. The people among whom he was to appear are mentioned as having no relationship whatsoever with the people of Arabia among whom he first appeared. Now this verse, or these verses, were revealed to Hazrat Muhammad ﷺ when he was sitting in company of some of his companions, some Arabs and one non-Arab were all sitting there. When he recited these verses, immediately the question which was addressed to him was, who would be those people? That means everybody understood that because no one else is mentioned, so Hazrat Muhammad ﷺ would repeat his visit. So they were surprised and said, who would be those people among whom you would appear? Now the answer to that question clarifies everything and answers every question which should have been asked. He put his hand on the shoulder of Salman Farsi, the only non-Arab sitting there in company of the Arabs, and said, Law kana al-imanu in the thuraya لَنَالَهُ رَجُلٌ مِّنْ هَؤُلَاءِ. If the faith deserted earth and was elevated to Pleiades, that constellation of stars, a very special, everybody perhaps knows what Pleiades is in English. We know in Urdu it is called Suraya. So the Holy Prophet said, if Iman, that is faith, deserted the earth so completely that it was removed to the Pleiades, a man from among these people, from among them, would bring the faith back to earth. And this is the meaning of وَآخَرِينَ مِنْهُمْ لَمَّا يَلْحَقُوا بِهِمْ. Now, incidentally, he answered, in fact, many questions. Number one, why was there any need for anybody to come? And the answer to this was, Iman, faith, can desert you despite the book being there, despite the traditions being there, because the books and the traditions are no guarantee for the safety and security of the faith within the hearts. Books remain and people go astray. So he said this is the reason why there should be some other divine visitation during that period. The second question which should have been asked, why should it happen? You have just come. And when should it happen? The answer was it would happen at a very remote and distant point. Until it can be described that the faith had almost deserted the earth. It would not happen before that. So he was talking of a time far removed from his own age. Then the question could have been asked as to, will you come again or will it be someone else? The answer to that was that he put his hand on the shoulder of a non-Arab. And that also answered other questions. It said, when he said he will be from him, from his people, it meant that number one, he was not be an Arab, and then he was not be from my progeny because he was a non-Arab, and non-Arabs could not be called progeny of Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he was be a non-Arab person anyway. So this explains the meaning of ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَن يَشَاءُ. This is Allah's grace. He's free to grant this grace to anyone he likes. Nobody can force his hand. So this is the verse, this is the tradition which the lady required from me to point out so she can study herself. And this tradition is taken from the most authentic book of traditions, that is Bukhari. The verse is from the Surah Jummah in the beginning, and from Kitab al-Bukhari she can find the hadith so easily, speaking of latter days, etc. Acha. I am reminded by the private secretary that we have some other engagements and the time is about over. So have you finished your list of questions or?
There's just one last one.
Okay, please, I'll answer that and then I'll take leave. Yes.
This lady says, हुजूर जो लोग आपसे अक्सर मुलाकात करते हैं, आपको अच्छा लगता है या नहीं?
Very. How can I describe this question? You say it all depends on those who visit me. If उनको अच्छा लगता है, then मुझे भी अच्छा लगता है. If they like it, then I also like it. And of course, they visit me because they like it. There is no compulsion. So I'm always responsive to the extended hand of love and friendship, and I always try to be more responsive, not just reciprocal, but more than what is offered. So that is, in fact, a source of spiritual energy which is keeping me going, right? But I have my limitations. It is the limitation of time which sometimes compels me to request some people that you have been visiting me so many times, please, this time no more, because there are others who will be deprived. Not that I don't like their repeated visits, but because these repeated visits would deprive some others of even a few visits if I permit them every time to come and share my time. But as far as my personal reaction is, I always enjoy meeting people and families, particularly, small children. They all come to me and sit, sometimes my children sit on my laps, and we have a feeling of one very large universal family. People visiting from Africa, from Indonesia, from Thailand, from America, make no difference. They're all parts and parcels of the same atmosphere of universal brotherhood. It's a very important institution, which with the grace of Allah is now progressing and developing and evolving with the passage of time.
So there is a sister here from Dubai. She wants to ask one question.
Yes, one short question with one short answer, right? Okay, come here.
She says, why do the Sunnis not allow the Qadianis to pray with the Sunnis when all the prayers are the same?
You see, as far as their permission is concerned, even if they permit us, we will thankfully decline that permission. Because there is a problem which we face. We genuinely believe, I'm telling you, we genuinely believe that Allah has appointed that Imam Mahdi who was promised to the Ummah of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallam by God through Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah. He prophesied that a time would come when an Imam would be directly appointed by God. Correct?
Yes.
Why should an Imam be appointed by God when there's so many Imams in the world already? You turn the corner and there is another masjid and another Imam, or even two Imams fighting for the possession of that mosque. So when there's so many, why should God appoint an Imam? The reason is that when God considers them to be incapable of discharging their responsibilities, as being worthy of calling them, of being called Imams of a Ummah of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah, when that saturation point reaches, only then God takes these exceptional measures of taking the matter of appointment in His own hands and appoints an Imam. This He has been doing throughout the last many hundred years by appointing Mujaddideen. But still, the downhill journey was not stopped. It was stayed for a while, stopped for a while, but again another downward, movement of the whole Islamic Ummah. And you always, when you look back, you see the steps. They started from the time of Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, from a very high platform. And where we are today, we are touching almost the rock bottom, aren't we? So that is why the message given to us was that a time may come when a very special Imam, not an ordinary Mujaddid, a special Imam will be appointed by God, and he would start the movement of reviving Islam universally. Now this Imam, when he is appointed by God, has genuinely the right to lead in everything religious, right or wrong. So those who reject him and call him as an impostor, while they have not been appointed Imams by God, but they have been selected or elected by people, or they have usurped the office by some politics, how can those who believe in the Imam, divine Imam, say their prayers behind a so-called Imam who rejects Allah's appointment? How can their heart be free to say their prayers behind them? So that is the big problem in the way of Ahmadis, saying their namaz behind those Imams who call Hazrat Masih Maud as an impostor, a liar, a fabricator. Even if somebody abuses your parents, you can't say your prayer behind him with, with your free heart. So this is much more than that. But fortunately for us, they don't permit us to attend their mosque, enter their mosque anyway. See? Thank you, Jazakallah. All right, now I take leave of you, Jazakumullah.